first 4 series of the day. Now we're going to see, of course, Free Pumps versus Pure Luck. Free Pumps, little do you know, they come in as the number 3 seed in the tournament against Pure Luck, so definitely the advantage team coming out of the time trials. We'll have to see if that statistics comes into actual play when we head into Maw of Souls for the final of this first round of the regional weekend.
So Claris, as always with these maps, we've seen 100 times. We saw it last regionals. We're going to see it next week and the week after. We're going to see an entire pull everything with this first boss to Imran right here. And it's really just going to be about, as we discussed here pre-match as well, which team does it the cleanest. Are we going to have a death on either side, anything of that sort? Not surprised, of course, to see the double Blood DK and double Holy Paladins coming out from each of the teams.
Double Windwalker Monk, well, one of them has already gone down, so they're going to have to get that res up as quickly as possible here on the side of Free Pumps. Now, double Windwalker is something that we saw a lot of, and another death going down already for Free Pumps. This is a bit odd. Oh,
bit odd indeed. A lot of dip in health as well. But we do know that this trash in this dungeon isn't. We're 1% down on the Hunter. The DK going down as well doesn't proc that perg as well. But everyone's just spiking up and down, trying to stabilize with some of these bursting stacks right now. But as I was saying, we do know that part of the danger of this map, especially for a melee comp, is that there's just so much splash and residual damage coming out of these mobs. As we saw a lot of the danger with that Windwalker going down, unfortunately. Now they're stuck 4-manning the rest of this boss right now, slowly falling in percent behind Pure Luck, which is already at 30% mark on Imran.
Yeah, you don't want to have to reset this boss, especially if there's outlying trash that hasn't been killed off fully as well. If you say to yourself, okay, we want to reset, if we've lost one person and go back in with a full 5, you've still got so much health to chew through. So focusing on Pure Luck now, an interesting composition that they've actually brought to the table here with that Moonkin, with that Fire Mage, and the Havoc Demon Hunter. So very, very different comps coming into this first game.
Yeah, you don't see that typical Windwalker that we've seen pretty much all of the teams running in this series right now. Of course, Cimarron going down here for Pure Luck. They'll blow that horn right away and go down into the bowels of the ship, getting ready to do what is one of the more dangerous pulls on the ship, of course, because of these enclosed spaces. A lot of splash damage, once again, from the barrels. You have the Defiant Strike going out. Of course, you have the Deceptive Strike going out as well. On top of it, you have the Quaking to dodge as well. Good view here of the Moonkin. I'm sure Nagura backstage is very proud at the moment.
With a little backpedal out of the just cleave in front of that mob as it does appear in front. And of course, as you mentioned, it's a really good point when you look at melee comps against range comps. At least range comps, even in these narrow halls, have a little bit more room to play with.
Absolutely. So they're all down this now. I don't think they pulled the Hounds on top of it, but the Hounds are quite dangerous on their own, and they want to make sure that they time the patrol from that Mariner that comes in and out, because they will have to pull that to the side with the Grime Walker a bit later on, as most teams opt to skip that way. Of course, on the side here, Imran down to 5% for Free Pumps. They will be able to down him momentarily and work down in the ships, but they got their work cut out for them, Claris, at this point.
They really do. They really do. They're hoping for Pure Luck to have a bit of a harder time, maybe on the boat past Harboron. I mean, technically speaking, if you've got a few range members against Harboron, there is the potential that they screw up how are they going to actually place the ads, etc., and that could cost them a little bit, but it's unlikely with, again, how well-versed these teams are on this map.
We do see the expected skip here from Pure Luck. No luck involved in that at all. Troy going down. They will res him upstairs in a moment and aggro these two champions. Important, of course, to coordinate your interrupts properly to make sure that none of those AoE fears go out, which you can actually outrange, so the healer can safely sit back, but shouldn't bank on the missing an interrupt in the first place. No. Teams often, as we're seeing here, I was just about to say, drag these champions up to Harboron and opt to kind of aggro Harboron along with it. Now, the problem here, of course, is that you have to keep interrupts on 3 targets now. You have the 2 champions, you have the servitor that Harboron spawns, and you have a double caster team, which innately has much longer interrupt cooldowns than do their tank and melee counterparts. So it's going to be really important that they get this down properly.
Yeah, Quaking less of a problem for some of the middle portions of this, but actually dropping down the solar beam there to try and keep some lockdown on this position for the moment. But they're still going to have to group up. Chaos Nova went out there as well to stun those ads as they're going to come out and deal with them. And obviously, you just want to dodge that scythe. Very easily dodged there. The Mage, even dropping down the Rune of Power, has to dodge out of it, so losing a little bit of damage, but not much.
Right, sure, Claris. Now, they do have to be careful with this kind of real estate restriction that they're getting from the Nether Rip. They have to constantly maneuver Harboron around the platform to make sure that they don't get trapped in a corner, because if they're separated from some of the ranged players, they could have the servitor or some of those extra ads spawn at a range, causing them to have to run through and support interrupt through some of that Nether Rip. In the meantime, of course, Free Pumps just now moving up to that double champion pack and getting ready as well to go up to Harboron, but they're not really closing that gap. This is the problem. And at this point, they got to know that they're a bit behind, so they're going to have to get some risky pulls in.
I feel so validated. I just got my first salute right, you are. So
on purpose, too. I saw the gleam in your eyes as I said it.
I love it. I love it. Harbor on here, 40% at the moment, dodging the scythe once again. Another solar beam comes down to make sure that these aren't going to be casting any time soon. And once those ads are dealt with, it's almost like you're fighting the ads more than Harbor on. Harbor on, for me, in this fight isn't that much of an issue, but the ads can be really annoying if you don't deal with them properly.
Yeah, I mean, you can die in the blink of an eye. The scythe, too, I mean, it does a ton of damage. But you're right, Harbron is more of a secondary focus once these ads spawn. Kind of a cleave on the side. Free Pumps now just working upwards towards Harbron, whilst Pure Luck is, of course, at 15%. Dealing with their last servitor here, making sure to get that interrupt in, dodging that scythe. Spider Bears does well there. And after this, of course, we're rearing up, for that massive boat pull leading up to Skjold.
Yeah, and it's not exactly the most traditional composition to then take that boat pull, so it's going to be interesting to see how they're actually dealing with that. Of course, yeah, the Blood DK and the Holy Paladin are always there. They're the staple. That's what you're going to see, and as they throw down at those Sky Step potions. There we go. And they will be moving all the way up now to grab things into place.
So Harbron going down indeed. It was not love at first sight. They do grab everything at the edge of the ship. In the meantime, aiming it down. And advantage here, as we were discussing earlier, the Moonkin Beam is actually really, really useful as a result, because it's just there's so many casting mobs. You have the Torrent going out, damage, healing, everything. But the champions are still involved here, and you got to make sure that you can't splash AoE interrupt some of those casts. So you have to hard interrupt them. They do well here, but they're starting to play on the defensive. The tank is already procced per, goes down in the meantime, Troy. Now he does have the checkpoint, of course, at Harbron's platform. Team doing well here to backpedal and get back to that tank so that they can alleviate some of that aggro.
And thankfully, everything was already very low, so they didn't lose that tank halfway through this pack or anything like that to force that kind of reset, so they were able to deal with it very efficiently. But you're right, I mean, the Blood DK, the Moonkin, for me, it's shades of 2017, where it was a staple, Gorfien's grasp into that solar beam to deal with so many trash packs throughout the MDI, and it's really paying dividends here.
It's working out well for them. They are kind of menacingly kiting around the top of the platform right now. It is working out for them. We still have the Fire Mage proccing that Cauterize, so a bit of lack of safety for a while from them. They do manage to clean it up and are now heading over to Skjold, which is the last 8% of the trash that they need. Of course, that fog wall will not actually dissipate until they finish off Skjold. In the meantime, Free Pumps now just working with the massive pull on the ship just starting, so they're going to have to, I mean, it's all eyes on them right now. If they want to catch up, they can't go on the defensive on this pull, and they have to crush it, much like we saw Free Marcy do in their series. They killed it so quickly, and with double Windwalker, you'd expect that they could do that.
Yeah, definitely. Able to pump out a ton of AoE damage and also keep themselves alive very easily with that Touch of Karma, with that Diffuse Magic, if they're able to actually get into some kind of tense situations. But with Skjold being focused down now, again, it's very simple. He's going to blink, he's going to try and focus, hit someone, and then you can interrupt that cast to make sure you're negating as much damage as possible. You don't need to be super packed up here with the ranged DPS that they have available to them, so you're not really in a threat of bouncing that quaking off each other either.
And Pum's doing very well with it indeed. They do actually manage to kill all the trash. Unfortunately, a bit of sloppiness there with another death on the Windwalker. They release right away back at Harbron's checkpoint and are now heading over to Skjold. So they did close some of that gap in the meantime. Really well done by them. Lots of damage coming out of those two Windwalkers. But Pure Luck is already finishing off Skjold in just a moment, dealing with the rest of those skeletons, as Jack and I dubbed them earlier. And as soon as they're down, they're going to start that Helia RP. And at that point, it's just a matter of, who's killing Helia on her second re-emerging phase of last phase.
Almost a whole skill ahead, so not the best of positions for Pumps to be in, as now we will see Helia emerging from the depths just to get started up, and obviously you want to jump down as quickly as possible, get that RP going, as it's not always triggered for them. But with all of this, it's the same kind of situations again. You're getting those 6 tentacles. Once they're done, once the Destructors are dealt with efficiently, then you can transition to the next phase.
And the Destructors are particularly important in this phase, as they do deal heavy melee damage to their current target, hopefully the tank in this case. They do spawn every 30 seconds. Now, players have to be careful. If they're kind of left by themselves, as we can see the Mage in the corner, or the Boomkin, of course, in the middle as well, those tentacles can spawn in random spots, and if the tank is not nearby, not only can the player fall in the hole, but then the tentacle will melee them immediately and cause them to be essentially one-shot. Players doing well here to move to the right and dodge Helia's frontal whilst working on those 6 tentacles. Free Pumps just barely catching up now, just finishing Skjold. They got to be hoping for a wipe from Pure Luck here.
They have to be. They have to be. And, you know, as you're mentioning, with the potential Destructor spawns, it really depends on how greedy the tank wants to be with just churning out a little bit extra damage on some of those Grasping Tentacles to then eventually reposition himself to deal with the Destructor. Did spawn to the bottom right here on the boat, and our tank from Pure Luck was apt to the task, able to get there quite quickly and deal with that effectively.
A bit of unfortunate RNG not in favor of Pure Luck, so you can say they didn't have much luck in that case, spawning in the back there. They handle it well nonetheless. Actually, advantage here, of course, to their double range comp, able to kind of spread that Ignite. These do have a massive range, so that Ignite spread, and of course the Boomkin multi-dotting everything there, able to deal with that back Destructor Tentacle. Now finishing their 6th Tentacle, Pure Luck waiting for the RP and for Helia to re-emerge.
Let's hope we don't get the same situation from our previous series, as obviously there was a wipe that I ended up going down here. One of the more uncommon locations to wipe, but for now should be fine. They've repositioned themselves towards the back of the boat, avoiding some of that AoE damage, and here comes Helia. Certainly
don't want to be walking the plank with Helia now. It is important to note that Helia, you don't actually have to get her to 0% in this case. She will stop the fight at about 70.5%. Now, the goal for players is usually to get her down in one phase. You have 1 minute until she submerges, but I'm not sure how much they're going to be able to dish out. I don't think actually we've seen any of the teams so far, including the China regionals last week, be able to pull that off. Some got close in the 71-72% range, but it would be a great feat if they could do it. And if Pure Luck doesn't manage to do it, it's really Free Pump's only hope to try and catch up. But in the meantime, another death going down for one of their Windwalkers.
Yeah, it's very difficult to do, especially when you have to use Bloodlust in certain positions here on Maw of Souls to make it a little bit easier for yourself. One thing that is nice is that mages, obviously, if they have the ring available to them, can still have some of that haste buff effective for themselves, but everybody else is still kind of trapped in low man's land. Unless, of course, Havoc Demon Hunter maybe has Cephas available when the interrupt comes down, have a little bit of a haste buff himself, but it's minor compared to the overall Bloodlust.
Important it is, of course, for the Havoc Demon Hunter as well to try and prioritize that interrupt, because you do want that extra resource from a successful interrupt for the Demon Hunter class. Helia just now submerging, unfortunately. Pure Luck will have to wait around for about 20 seconds, dodging the tentacles that emerge, whipping around in a circle, and of course the swirlies from that Frosty above Troy doing well there to pop the AMS just to get a bit of runic power and get ready for pumping that bit of extra DPS on Helia as she now re-emerges up for Pure Luck.
Yeah, prior we saw that AMS used to great effect just to soak up some. Oh, but a death already going down on our Demon Hunter. Gets back on up. Mustn't have been able to anticipate the damage coming out and then dying off effectively. But yeah, as you're saying, the AMS is great. You can soak up some of the waves if you really want to deal with it, and that is dead. Pure Luck with the win for game number 1.
Yeah, Helia was actually a 73% on the other side. They almost managed to burst it down before the transition. Definitely wouldn't count out Free Pumps in this one. They may be down 1 after an unfortunate start to Maw of Souls, but of course with the double Windwalker and the Hunter, a lot of damage potential there. The number 3 seed from Australia, you've definitely got to give them the props on their map.
So we've seen a lot of variance in some of the pulls starting early in this game in Kalaris, as I'm sure you've seen last week too. It's usually a fairly large pull with this 2+4, 6 mobs, and then Glaviana as well. But some people have gone the whole circle around and pulled some of that. Actually, we're seeing it right now. So they do pull, and they're going for the 5-pack as well in the back. So big pull coming off. Arsfu getting a bit of damage in Cleave in the mean. Now, the problem here, of course, is that there's a ton of Cleave coming in from these Demon Hunter mobs, and they also blink on the tank. So they can 180 the tank, do a Cleave, which will obviously splash onto the melee, so they have to be really careful with positioning as well.
Yeah, and as you see already, the Windwalkers are really churning out the damage at the moment, separating themselves up for that quaking. Likewise on the other side here for Pure Luck, they're able to take quite a few of the mobs coming out from here, and they're not doing too badly themselves, especially with that Fire Mage being able to pump out a ton of AoE with those Flame Strikes coming down as well. Everything's tanked on the same spot, there's no kiting, so Flame Patch can easily get out tons of benefit from that damage.
Notable to say as well that Free Pumps has used Bloodlust on that larger trash pull, while Pure Luck did not. They did a smaller pull, of course. They didn't opt for that 5-pack. Troy dipping quite low there, of course, getting that LOH right away on Glaviana. Once she hits that 50% mark, she will metamorphosize, dealing increased damage and starting to pulse AoE damage on the group. Of course, you also don't want to step in those fire pots as well. Tank getting so low, still no proc on Purg in the meantime. Free Pumps just pulling the rest of that large trash pull before Tirathon, the first boss of the dungeon.
Yeah, they came around the corner as well to pull the extra little bits of the pack, and that means that, you know, it's technically a very risky pack. We actually saw, I think, think it was a full wipe earlier on in the day, but these Windwalkers are making mincemeat of it.
So it's actually this Unleashed Fury cast. That is the one that wiped the group prior. If you fail to interrupt that, I mean, it's just an immense amount of damage. Essentially one shot on most non-tank characters in the group. Free pumps now reaching Tirathon, as you said, 50% of the trash already done here. We are in a fortified setting, so Tirathon shouldn't theoretically be too much trouble for the group, but we're entering a 3-stage boss. Of course, we're at 70%, he will enter his Vengeance Demon Hunter stage, and at 40% enter the Havoc stage, where there will be pulsing damage on the group, similar to some of the trash that we saw earlier.
Yeah, and eventually, you see, you guys have mentioned it time and time again, but melee groups benefit in that when it goes into that Vengeance state, because the chain comes out and you can easily stick with the boss, but actually Hunter is one of the best ranged players, characters even I should say, to actually deal with it as well. You can still keep moving whilst pumping out a good amount of your rotation to then reposition with disengage and the little bit of extra speed boost that you get from it.
Yeah, free pumps, you're right, their comp is well built for this boss. Subs pumping out a ton of damage as well as they start to circle around the base, and the Warglaives have gone down. Questionably enough, Tirathon does regain Warglaives at 40%, even though the ones are still spinning around the room, so we'll have to find out exactly where he gets them from. Pure Luck now just only starting to work towards that dangerous trash. They haven't even pulled that Unleashed Fury trash that they have to make sure they interrupt, so we'll have to keep an eye on them as they work around to Tirathon. But Tirathon dropping quite low already, entering that Havoc phase right now, and they're rounding out the last phase here. Free pumps getting ready to pull the Imp Mother soon.
Careful of the Eye Beam and make sure, as our Blood Death Knight falls quite low there while that's going on. The Eye Beam is going to occur in just a few moments' time. Dealt with the ads quite nicely. Of course, there is always that pulsing AoE as well that's going to have to be dealt with too. And the chain's getting quite close. Got to be a bit careful there.
So you can see Subs now, of course, converting from that very offensive mindset, starting to reel it in defensively, having to heal a lot of the group here as they start pulsing down from that damage. Arsfu dipping quite low there. Luckily manages to heal back up, no fatality. Pure Luck now having pulled all of that dangerous trash, deals with it quite well. Ulfid goes down, and they soon will be rearing up to pull Tirathon as well. But I mean, free pumps way ahead at this point. They did use their Bloodlust at the start in order to do that larger pull, and it seems to really be paying out for them.
Well, the thing is that they can get another one in down the line, right? Which is going to help out nicely. The funny thing is that they're still so ahead, but they got quite unlucky with how that chain moved. You know, they lost a little bit of melee DPS there that was available to them. So pulling all of those imps, getting the Imp Mother down, just avoid the AoE cone that comes out from her end just a little bit, and wow, those imps sure died fast.
Yeah, so of course a two-pronged attack always on this Imp Mother, as they'll typically have one DPS go around the side to round up one set of imps, and the tank go around the other, meeting in the middle with a nice AoE grip right on top of that Imp Mother, who has quite the junk in the trunk, might I add. She is going down quite quickly. In a fortified setting, she is considered a trash mob, so she will have that buff extra from the fortified, taking a fair bit of time to down her. Of course, the door will open after that, going downstairs to Inquisitor. Pure Luck just now getting to that 48% mark on Tirathon. They will be getting to that Havoc Demon Hunter phase soon, but you know, as you mentioned earlier, Kalaris, their comp suffers a bit from this. They have double caster comp, so they'll constantly need to reposition, stay ahead of the channel. They'll lose a bit of damage from that.
Yeah, definitely. Especially, you know, something like a Mage, as we've already mentioned with Rune of Power, if you don't cast it in the right position, that's why you kind of save it a little bit at some moments to actually position it in the right spot once chains have hit towards the edge of the walls and stuff like that. But now we're heading on down to Inquisitor, which I said it before and I'll say it again, it's one of my least favorite bosses in the entire game.
You subjects. Now, two typical strats that we usually see on this boss. One will be to follow the Inquisitor to whatever jail he decides to open up at 70 and 40% twice during the fight. Of course, the other one will be to pull him back to one of the doorways and LOS, or line of sight, the spawning jail members, as to force them to come over. When you have a Blood DK, though, it's better usually to be offensive, because you do have the luxury of being able to grip, or even AoE grip, all of those mobs together and not really have to deal with all of the spread out damage that you have to do, especially at the Mogu portal, for instance. So they are opting to do that right now, chasing over. Now, we have to be careful here, because the Warlock does cast that Seed of Corruption. If that cast goes off, it is a ton of damage on the group, so have to be careful to interrupt that. Yeah,
into the demons are at the beginning of all of this, I think. But anyway, regardless, like, if you know, dealing with the demons is very kind of frontal and just offensive, as you mentioned before. But sometimes, as you say, they do like to opt to line of sight for the Old Gods pack, right? Which, with the faceless ones, can be a bit irritating and stuff like that. But it's 50-50. It's really just kind of personal preference what they want to do, whilst, of course, still facing the eyes to make sure you're not going to get disorientated all the while.
And I do like what they're doing here, moving the boss over, getting him in position already for the second jail, which we do know will be the faceless ones, as we saw in the previous two series ago. Pure Luck only now downing the Imp Mother. So they're a fair ways behind at this point. We're already starting to edge on that territory of we're hoping for a wipe on free pumps in order for Pure Luck to catch up. We haven't seen free pumps do any pulls on any of the surrounding Defiler dogs that we see at the top of the balcony there, which groups often do, especially in this non-bolstering setting, to try and get some of that extra trash percentage in. So a bit more trash that they'll have to work later unless they have a more grand master plan for some of the trash that they pull. We have to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, who knows? We've already seen some crazy stuff this tournament. We could see some later on. But one thing's for sure is that Free Pumps is looking very, very confident on their pick. Surprise, surprise. And, you know, whilst you were mentioning it before, that two-pronged pull on the Imps, you know, that's why Holy Paladin is so prevalent. There's these tools like the Blessing of Protection to have one of those DPSs be able to run around the other side to then pull them all together. It just pays off so much in so many of these instances to have those tools available.
Free Pump's doing well now to kill off the last of those Faceless Ones trash. Doing well to avoid, of course, the gaze from the Inquisitor eyes in the middle of the room. We should mention those, that if you do not face that beam, that squiggly beam on your screen right now, by the time the 2-second cast finishes, you will be disoriented. And of course, if the tank gets caught in that situation, they will get disoriented, losing aggro on whatever they might have, and somebody's going to get smacked in the face. Tormentrum now going down for Free Pumps, who's soon to work on the remaining trash.
I think I'm just a baddie, and that's why I don't like this boss. That's going to be my idea of it. Like, tanking it, and I'm like, oh, you know, I'm getting complacent. I lose it, and it's like, well, now I'm disorientated. Great fun.
Practice makes perfect. Pure Luck at 56% on Tormentrum, whilst Free Pump's just now pulling Ileana, one of the kind of mini-boss style. Now, she does get buffed by the surrounding dogs. That is a lot of volcanics off in one spot, and we did see some of the extra Scorchers and Defilers come in from the edge balconies right now as they opt to kind of DPS them down, get that trash percentage up that, like I said, most teams often pull with the boss. I'm a bit shocked as to why they didn't do that in the first place. Nonetheless, they're not having any issues with it here.
Yeah, I guess they just wanted full control on Inquisitor. At this level of play, you know, it's not that big a deal. You know, you see it time and time again, that kind of pull. But, you know, it's by the by. Free Pumps here, they shouldn't feel too pressured, especially if they know the state of Pure Luck right now, considering their current progression.
So after Ileana dies here, we will have the option of either going to Ash Golem or Glazer. It's kind of a split path. Both bosses, of course, will need to be killed before further progress towards Cordana. Different groups do different strategies, and it often depends on how their cooldowns line up and how the Bloodlust timer lines up. We do see that Free Pumps has another minute 15 seconds on their Bloodlust, and they opt to go to our favorite eyeball boss, Lord Glazer, first.
Yeah, lots of potential mirrors later on. That's one thing that comes out from this. But Glazer overall, she's going to be shooting out a lot of little orbs, which actually do hurt Glazer, if I recall correctly, right?
They do indeed, yep.
Yeah, so that's something that you can try and manipulate a little bit if you're able to have those kind of bounce into him to speed up the process of being able to kill him off. And, you know, as much as a relative of Durumu almost, keeping an eye on you, he doesn't really keep too much of an eye on you, considering he just starts spinning around and looking elsewhere.
I mean, with all those orbs being reflected back into Glazer, it sheds a tear in his eye. He will go into his immunity phase in a moment, which happens about 40-45 seconds after the pull. During this, as you mentioned earlier, of course, players will have to redirect the beam, his beam rather, with 5 of the statues and redirect it right into his butt, all around the room, 180 degrees. But of course, if that overloaded lens happens to pierce the beam, get pierced by the beam as well, it will explode and promptly wipe the group. They have no problem cleaning it up, though. They've already positioned the mirrors well out of time and are now ready to do 100% increased damage on Glazer for about 10 seconds.
Yeah, not too bad. 56% at the moment. That's rapidly going to decrease, as you can see in that health bar, especially with a double Windwalker Monk that we've been touting what feels like almost the entirety of Chinese MDI now coming into this one, and now we see it in full force, and it's good to be able to see how fast it's able to deal with Glazer.
I mean, there's a good reason why people keep talking about Windwalker Monks, and it's on your screen right there with Free Pump's damage, I mean, just pumping out at this point. They hurry over as quickly as they can. Of course, poor Blood DK, not the most mobile tank in the world, but they are hurrying over to our resident, actually Molten Giant, who is currently frozen, Ash Golem. Now, Ash Golem will start in this frozen state, immediately break out, and very soon into the fight, as we see that Bloodlust pop, they will be able to turn those statues and refreeze him, causing a brittle phase, of course, for 20 seconds, where he will take 20% increased damage, and that is where you want to see as much damage pumped forward, and of course the Windwalkers are very good at doing this, as you can during this time.
Yeah, not too bad at all. Sometimes, especially with like sub-row comps, you'll see the repositioning of him straight towards the elementals, so you can get a little bit more damage on out there while this extra burst phase is going on down. But again, very, very impressive patience here coming out. Pure Luck now just trying to catch up, also moving on to Ash Golem.
And right, they're just free pumps just now cracking a cold one with the boys as these things start to heat up here. Once some volcanoes go down on the side, we will see some molten patches start to go down as well. Now, players can intercept these and absorb it themselves in order to prevent them from being soaked by some of the lesser fire elementals that we will see spawn.
Yeah.
Should one of them hit the lesser fire elementals, well, there's going to be some damage on the raid. Nothing too threatening, though, in a 22 fortified setting. So some teams do choose to ignore this as we see one spawn on the left side. Important to note as well that Pure Luck has gone over to Ash Golem as well, but they haven't killed Glazer yet. So they're a boss behind at this point.
Yeah, AMS is really the MVP when you can see the DK just running around, being able to soak up everything. Of course, you saw Sups there as well. Just go and torrent the interrupt on one of those embers. Any little bit of extra negation of damage that you can do across these kind of fights is very good.
Yeah, some players will have to enjoy Hurricane Torrent while they can. Ash Golem going down now. In the meantime, they will head over back upstairs and likely skip that jailer. They're already at 92%. That should be perfect, or about perfect percentage for heading downstairs, dealing with the 4 spider pull, skipping most of the dark area, and then dealing with the Broodmother / final mob right before Cordana's door. Pure Luck just now getting Ash Golem to 20%, but after this, they got to head right over to Glazer's room.
Yeah, they do. So not having the easiest time at all. Free pumps, meanwhile, can actually find themselves in a very good spot, just moving on towards the elevator. Do they skip this and then just get the rest of the trash down towards the bottom?
Yeah, so typically we're going to see what's going to happen here. I think the tank usually is the one that kind of pulls the jailer to the side. Everyone safely runs by, but I think they're going to try to just walk right by it.
Yes.
Okay. Didn't think
Monks.
Monks didn't
Hooray.
do that with paralysis on the jailer, but I guess you learn something every day. Everyone safely runs by, pops their avalanche potions. Hopefully they have good RNG on where the elevator is. It seems that they do right now, and they'll be heading. Oh, they unfortunately get caught at the top, so they'll have to wait to go all the way back down, buying Pure Luck just a bit of time as they've now downed Ash Golem and are heading over to Glazer.
I hope the jailer comes back for retribution as they came back up, but it's not going to be the case. How dare you just walk by me. So going to get the light, and overall the darkness mechanic here, very important. You can't attack things without having the light next to it, and this first spider pack is going to be the first victim usually.
Certainly don't want to be caught alone in the dark. Now the problem here is that if the person holding the light dies, the light oftentimes will actually despawn, forcing the player to go all the way back to one of the light pillars and grab it back. So it's really important to execute this properly. As we had alluded to earlier, they are killing the first 4 spiders, after which they will do a combination of Invis pots and avalanche pots to head over the next pack of spiderlings, plus some of the shade mobs that throw the glaives out, excuse me.
Yeah.
And they will pick up the last Broodmother and head over to Cordana's gate.
Yeah, the Spirit of Vengeance, it kind of rounds things out with that Broodmother, as you're mentioning. So just kind of slightly move on further. But wait a minute, hello.
So Sups seem to have a bit of a boo-boo there.
Yeah.
I believe, at least. Luckily, does not manage to get anybody else in combat. Everybody safely goes across, and they do use that res on him and walk over, grab the Broodmother, as we alluded to, and move over to the last spirit as to efficiently cleave them down, and then, of course, get ready for Cordana.
Yeah, just stay out of those little bushes that spawn on the right-hand side. The barbed wire, I don't know what it is. It's something. It's thorns. It's spiky. Don't stand near that, and you'll be fine. But killing off that spirit and then bringing down the Broodmother. But you're going to drop your light, right? And then you need to pick up a new one.
You're absolutely right, but I am a bit concerned, actually, about their trash percentage right now. I don't think this Broodmother gives you 4% or 3 points something. I don't remember correctly. We'll have to find out in just a moment. They seem to be ever so confident, because if they did miscalculate their trash, this would be the time to turn around and kill a bit more of the spiders in the meantime. So I'm sure that they have it on lockdown. Of course, they're getting the RP ready on Cordana right now.
I mean, even if they did have to, they still have quite the sizable advantage over their opponents, so it's not too pivotal in a moment.
And
but
there we are.
There you go, 100%.
So they do move over to Cordana, which of course is composed of about 3 phases. 2.5. She does disappear at 75% and spawn a shade of herself, which will actually capture the light from the players. The players will need to free up that light by killing the shade and revealing Cordana. However, there is a nice advantage here for free pumps, as they do have a hunter. The hunter can use their flare to immediately get Cordana, hopefully immediately if they don't miss, immediately get Cordana out of her shadows and come over, and they can effectively cleave both mobs together.
Yeah, not too bad. And they do spawn in predictable locations as well, which is quite nice. As long as you're cleaning up those puddles with the light as well, that's very important. And then, of course, the deadly hedge maze of doom that's also quite moving can be a bit of an irritant, but not too much. People are able to deal with that quite well.
Not too much. if you get rid of the pools on the ground, because if you're kind of crowded by the pools, then it often detracts the person with the light somewhere in the corner of the platform. Player number 2 is not paying attention to where the gap in the wall spawns. They get hit by it. Everyone laughs. I have a bad day because everyone laughed at me. But yes, so at 40%, we will see these 4 walls spawn. She does immune for 40 seconds during it. So during that, players will just have to do nothing but pay attention to the walls. And then, of course, she will go back into a vulnerable state, spawning another avatar in the far left corner from this camera angle that we're seeing, which you can actually stun in order to get rid of her immunity shield.
Yeah, as long as you're there, right there and then as she spawns. But going to be able to deal with that first wall quite well, and didn't quite see where the gap was, but the players definitely did.
But they did, and that's the important part.
Exactly.
They do deal with a bit of splash from that quaking, nothing too much to handle right now, especially because they're, I mean, essentially just AFKing. Yeah. Well, not really AFKing, otherwise they get hit by the wall, but they're getting ready for that final gap as they play it safe, and that is a good spawn for the final gap in the wall, as it will lead them into that corner at the bottom left of your screen as you're watching at home right now, which is always where that first shade does spawn. Cordana now vulnerable again. They will drag her over to that corner. Flare goes up immediately to make sure that you can detect that shrouded mob if you don't have the light there in the meantime.
I like to call it strategically slowing down instead of the AFK move here, as they do move up towards that top corner to react as quickly as they can to that stun, get back onto Cordana, and it should be fine. Meanwhile, like, you have Pure Luck on the Broodmother. They are so far behind. It doesn't look like there's going to be a wipe here on Cordana Felsong unless they all get knocked off the platform somehow, but I doubt that's going to happen.
And if they got knocked down, they would probably just get right back up again.
Yeah, I don't think they'd have any issue. That was a pretty one-sided affair. 3 pumps, of course, your victor in that game. And I mean, I even wonder how much of that was the map. The series were going to take a romantic ride over to Court of Stars, although there's no love lost here between the 2 teams. But between our casters, I certainly hope there will be. Slud and Kalaris for the final game of the series. Take it away.
Oh, Adrian, be still in my heart.
That was well played. I loved all that sequence. It was sick.
He had it ready from the get-go.
Yeah.
So now we do have a bit of kind of lovely romantic downtime to discuss some of what we're going to expect to see in this dungeon. Now, there is a bit of kind of trash sequence coming up with, you know, killing those scouts, making sure that they hit some of those pillars up to lessen the amount of mobs that we see at the very first boss. You don't usually want to kill all of, or get rid of all of the towers, because you do have a longer RP session unless you purposefully fail the kind of guess who game later, but we'll deal with that when we get there. Nonetheless, we do expect to see that both teams will try to incapacitate this first mob at the bottom of the stairs. Especially, we'll likely have a repentance from the Holy Paladins. Of course, we do have the Imprison over on the Havoc Demon Hunter. It's just a waste of time killing this one mob by itself, Claris.
Yeah, the Demon Hunter especially can just kind of fell rush forwards and get that Imprison down very quickly, so it kind of speeds up a little bit of the process if they really want to truly min-max everything. But I mean, it depends who gets off the boat first, I guess.
As well they should, because they're in a tournament right now for money, so hopefully they do want to min-max. So off the boat they go. We do see the CC coming up in a moment. It's actually a stun off the bat. They opt to go up the stairs. Sups gets into the hut and immediately runs upstairs while Pure Luck is already upstairs. They do get a disorient, luckily, on that sentry. Now, there are 2 sentries here by account of the beat teaming. Unfortunately, they do get a pull on the double constructs on the side, too. Not sure that's fully intended.
Yeah, the constructs are scary, especially if you allow them to get their casts off and start like healing up in terrible positions. But already, a protection is going to be in that position, and they are going to leave that alone.
Pure Luck just unlucky at the very start of the map here. 3 pumps moving up and dealing well with those sentries. Nothing crazy about it. No constructs. Now, I'm noticing that they're actually opting to skip the harbor at this point. They're doing their hop over the ravine here, and this is where kind of all eyes will be on this bursting affix with the teaming. There's going to be a lot of damage from these worms here.
You know, so far I'm not hating my prediction based on what we just saw, and I like that we have divided opinion. That's my favorite thing.
Is it too late for me to switch my opinion?
You can go. I'm okay with that.
I'm glad we didn't raise the stakes as to the loser shaves their head. Now, moving on, 3 pumps going up over the bridge here, opting to pull the sentries, of course, on the side, which you can actually skip, but they just want to make sure they get rid of it, probably with some trash percentage as well. Keep in mind, of course, in the teaming affix, you do have to kill extra trash percentage in order to complete that 100%. We already see that Purg has progged on their Blood DK. After crossing this bridge, they'll have to do with 1 more teaming pack prior to pulling that first boss. Pure Luck working actually on the harbor in the meantime that 3 pumps opted to skip.
Yeah, and now that you mention it, actually, on the teaming affix and quarter stars, I think later on, especially in the actual court itself, there's like packs with 2 constructs in them, right? Which can be very deadly that you absolutely want to avoid for the most part.
There are some very nasty packs in the court, including some double Inquisitor packs that teams often opt to just not deal with at all, and they kill some of the residual trash around the outside of the area. Just don't want to deal with. A lot of the interrupts on, the eyes and the storms as well. Subs dealing with that tower over there, going to the back as well to deal, and they will be preparing to pull the first boss patrol captain here.
Sneaky, sneaky. So, obviously, a little bit to deal with here. Of course, you're going to have to dodge some beams that do come out. You have to dodge these kind of frontal or side AoEs, I suppose you can call them. And then also, there's always that jumping that has to go down, unless it can be fully dispelled. But other than that, safe and sound. Safe and sound.
It can be dispelled, and of course subs can also apply a freedom as well, but it's really of no concern for the melee and the tank. They can just freely kind of jump up and down as they're DPSing the boss. Now, we do have a full screen scenario going on here. Might be a bit of a problem with the other team. We'll have to keep an eye on it. But he does opt to just dispel the hunter and also just freedom himself so that they're free to just, keep DPSing the boss, not having to deal with too much damage for that arcane binding. It is worth noting, of course, that the boss at 25% dies. I'm putting this in quotation marks, which of course the viewers at home can't see, because you can poison the flask that is sitting on the table nearby, and it will kind of kill the boss at 25% when he opts to go over and have a swig.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's very, very astute of you to, notice, and for the team as well, that, you want to just freedom the hunter. Unless you've got very specific legendaries on a hunter, only every other aimed shot can you actually cast without having to stand still, which is just an awkward nuisance, and not something that hunters are likely going to be running in these instances as a legendary setup. So it's always nice to give him that freedom.
Right, you are. Captain Gerdo now going over to the flask, about to have a drink. Now, there's 2 ways to approach the upcoming scenario here. One is that you'll oftentimes have the teams go back towards the start and backdoor once that door opens up to the court, while usually, actually, the Holy Paladin is the one that triggers the event by running all the way up the stairs, or the teams will all, as a group, go up the stairs and start the court on the left side, of course, depending on your perspective from where you're looking at, but the left side of the court, let's say, going towards the second boss. So we'll have to keep an eye on which way they decide to go. We do have a guard come in on the side. They decide to pull the guard plus the little worm pack for that extra percentage. There's no bolstering threat here, so which is one of the worst affixes in this dungeon because of all the little worms. I'll have to deal with that. And I could already see some of the players trailing down below the screen while Sups by himself goes up, so they will be opting for that backdoor strategy.
I mean, especially since having skipped the dock as well, just to get that extra little pack there next to the boss is quite a nice boon to have when you're eventually transitioning towards the court now. Meanwhile, Pure Luck does technically, yes, have that trash percentage available to them as a lead, but it's nowhere near the lead when you consider the position that Free Pumps is currently in.
Yeah, so we do see Subs finally start the event, die on purpose, because once he dies, he will reach the checkpoint of that backdoor area where he can res right now. And Free Pumps actually now going for the harbor that they opted to skip earlier, a bit safer after they've killed that first boss and dealt with that kind of roundabout, believing that they don't really need the healer at the start of it, so they're okay to just deal with it while Subs triggers the event. Pure Luck just now dealing with the last pull before the boss. Yeah,
it's just efficiency's sake, right? If you can do this whilst triggering, it's very nice. And as you can see, dealing with this at the same time, big trash though, while dealing with this boss too.
This is actually really scary because if that construct gets his heal off, he heals everything surrounding it for 5% per second. So they have to make sure to interrupt the charge, otherwise it's just game over for them. The boss included, I mean, it doesn't care what kind of max health you have in terms of raw numbers, just a percentage-based heal. So interrupts and stuns have to be on point.
Yep, and thankfully for them, they're not doing too badly against that. Whilst we see Free Pumps gearing up now to move in towards the court and start dealing with some of these bigger packs, big damage coming out from Avalanche already there. Must have got some nice procs as the marked shot. Sometimes takes a little while to proc, but overall it gets going.
Paladin is safely healing up all of that bursting, and this is one of those double Inquisitor packs that I was mentioning. They're going to plan to. Now, we didn't see too much damage compared to the Hunter come out of the 2 Windwalkers in the previous pack, so I'm assuming that the Windwalkers are going to be pumping a lot of damage. You definitely want to deal with these packs very, very quickly. You can see that Blood DK making grip there, making sure none of the storms go off, wanting to interrupt the eyes as well. Now, name of the game in this court, of course, is that we have to strip the 3 mini-bosses away from Talixay, the second boss. In order to do that, you either kill an Enforcer, or there's actually, we can only kill Enforcers in this case. Of course, there are no random events. As you know, for prestige of the of the competition, there are no random spawned items event as we see in live servers, so they will have to deal with 3 Enforcers here.
Yeah, and you can actually have, well, when we actually get to those, of course, they have a few mechanics that we can talk about, but already just continuing to grab as much trash as possible. You can see here that our Blood Death Knight is just attempting to pull as much together as possible, because you can really, some of these packs are very far apart, especially if you've got some in the middle, and once you've dealt with them, you're okay.
The Enforcer, you want to make sure to LOS the Enforcer, of course, as one of the, actually really as anybody, because there's a ton of damage coming out with those pulsing casts, making sure to interrupt the Mistresses there. Actually, they didn't manage to interrupt it. Both Windwalkers there getting hit by that fell detonation. Pure Luck now just being able to finally finish off Gerdo. We're going to have to keep an eye on them to see if they decide to do the backdoor strat too. Now, they've already dealt with the Harbor, so they can just go straight into this court trash, but Free Pump's definitely still ahead at the moment. Not to mention that there's a 7-death differential between the two teams. That's 35 seconds, and that's a huge amount of time.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. And, you know, we're going to see Free Pumps here continue to eventually grab the Enforcers from the boss, etc. Sorry, and the Generals, I should say. And all of these guys really need, again, that LOS potential that you need. You know, we're bouncing around the corners to make sure that you're not going to be taking those big AoE damages.
Of course, we have I'm a Kutcha here. I'm not sure who named that mob, but quite rightfully so. Lots of swords in her hands, all 4 of them, or 6 of them, I believe. They do have to get her down. Now, the reason that you have to strip the Generals from Talixay is because while they're in a group, they have an aura that increases the health and damage of all the surrounding party members. So you want to make sure that the boss doesn't have any of those once you pull her, otherwise she'll be way too difficult to deal with. Pure Luck now dealing with a huge pull. We do have a proc from the DK as well, but big pull in the court now that they've killed the first boss, and they're trying desperately to catch up in the meantime. Certainly a bigger pull than Free Pumps had at the start.
Yeah, it seems like, especially with the the Blood Death Knight. Did he actually fully die there?
He did.
I couldn't quite see from the range, but Gorfine's Grasp as well as that Solar Beam are going to work really well on a lot of those packs. Thankfully, though, the Death Knight doesn't spawn too far away. Spawns right at the gate, I think, right? Yep. So he can get back into action quite nicely.
Yeah, so, but the problem is another 2 deaths on the board.
Yeah.
We're now at 11 deaths instead of 9, so it's going to, I mean, they're just digging their hole deeper and deeper that they're going to have to get out of. Free Pumps now waiting for that very dangerous trash pack, especially on teaming with the double constructs to move by so that they get to the other side, deal with the imps on that side, and then, of course, I believe probably the Enforcer, the third one spawned on, or the second one, excuse me, spawned on this side, so they're rearing to pull that as well.
I've had nightmares about that double construct pack in the past. I've been accidentally pulling it and then causing a whole heap of issues, but they were able to sneak on past quite nicely, just dealing with this as time goes on. The double Windwalker just being able to get all of their stacks up on there with a spinning crane kick to bring that down nice and fast, and on to our lovely Inquisitor.
Luckily, there's only one in this pack,
yeah.
so it's not too dangerous here. So they'll be able to deal with that. And then the second Enforcer coming up. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Pure Luck is actually dealing with an Enforcer right now as well that they opted to pull with that surrounding impact as well. So they're just trying to kind of grab as much as they can together. But they're dealing with an Enforcer pack on top of the 3-pack that we just saw Free Pumps pull. Free Pumps opted to split them up. Now, if Pure Luck can pull this off successfully, they're going to be in a very good position to finally close some of that gap with their huge death differential for 45 seconds.
Yeah, they're not doing too bad, and as much as some of the packs are very volatile and crazy themselves in terms of the damage that they can pump out, so are the imps, to be honest with you. If you let a lot of those casts go out, they can effectively target someone down and really almost kill them, if not kill them. So it's good that they actually have that control available to them with the slightly unusual comp compared to what we're seeing from the rest of this region, but it's definitely paying off.
You love your Windwalkers.
There you go.
I mean, if they do the damage, what's not to love? Second Enforcer going down for Free Pumps. We'll in a moment see the second boss spawn. Now, this boss, of all the 3 mini-bosses, is the biggest pain in the butt, as it does cast a channeled spell, and the target of that player will get an increasing stack to 5 stacks at once, rather. I believe it goes up to 10, if I'm not mistaken. That will decrease your maximum damage done by 5% per stack. So certainly not what you want to be seeing on that unfortunate Windwalker in the meantime. You can line of sight the beam, but you have to do it before the actual cast starts going out. Otherwise, you will be caught, regardless if you break line of sight after the channel starts. And
that's why we saw the attempt, but unfortunately it was unsuccessful for that first one. And now moving on back, now they just gave up. They were like, well, whatever, we don't care. We'll heal through it. Especially since I think it was on the tank anyway, right? right? So no
one ever cares about the tank, unfortunately.
No, sorry, mate.
he's pumping out some good damage in the meantime. Free pumps. Now, Subs has run all the way across, grabbed the Enforcer on the completely far side of the court, and brought it over back to the group whilst they DPS Balgar the Watchful. Really well done by them. Huge time save, because at this point, they would need to be mounting up, cross the court, grab the Enforcer in a good position. So huge amount of time saves. Subs well survives the fell detonations as well, and they're already in prime position to get ready for the third mini-boss. Pure luck just dealing with the second Enforcer now.
Yeah, and it's funny because I hate to harp on the Windwalker train here as we continue these things on, but when a healer goes away and does that, you want your composition to be effectively able to kill off what's left as well as survive. And things like Windwalker monks, they have that ability, right? If you're getting targeted, you can use your diffuse magic if you need to be. You know, your touch of karma as well is going to help you out in certain situations for that big shield. So very, very resilient whilst being able to prepare these kind of unusual tactics.
And not to mention the blood DKs do as well lend a bunch of support with consumption. A lot of leech on the group, and with the amount of damage they're pumping out, that's a lot of health return on them. They're just continuing to pull a bit more trash with the third mini-boss to make sure that they reach that 100%, because after this last Fel Lord dies, they will have access to Talixay, the second boss, and after that it's straight to Melandris, so there is no more trash left except for that, of course, the hidden demon that they need to find. That does not give percentage, so they want to make sure they have that 100% prior to aggroing the second boss. Pure luck just now dealing with the second mini-boss. They still need to deal with the third Enforcer and then the Fel Lord themselves.
If Blizzard could just occasionally spawn Jaina in that room every so often and just really troll people, that would be the best thing out of all time, but unfortunately probably not going to end up happening anytime soon, as you're right, they're going to be moving on to this boss, and this boss is pretty cut and dry for the most part, when people are just stacking up, kiting back as the fire is spawned, and then being able to deal with the small minions effectively.
Yeah, so she does spawn, I believe every 20 seconds or so, she will spawn a group of 5 imps, similar to the imps that we saw in the trash. They need to be interrupted. I mean, this comp is so well built for it. 2 Windwalkers, they can split up leg sweeps for every wave. They're just absolutely going to destroy. Those packs are going to disappear. Now, what is important about this boss, and of course we are in, if I'm not mistaken, that tyrannical setting, that there is a ramping dot the longer the fight goes on. So eventually it will be unhealable. I don't think this pack will run into this group rather will run into too much trouble for that.
No, definitely not. As dealing with it quite nicely at the moment. Of course, some of the smaller imps can be slightly annoyingly positioned, but as long as you're properly stacking perfectly here, as you can see, the Hunter just slightly moving forwards for a moment there to then eventually move backwards with the entirety of the group. Because even if it's just like a few yards behind one of them, it definitely causes you quite a bit of disruption in being able to get to the imps right at the back.
Well baited by them as they form these small clumps of imps, as you just said. Pure luck just now moving on to their third mini-boss and then having to run over and then having to start Talixay. So they have closed some of the gap with their more reckless pulls that they've done throughout the court, but just not enough. And we have noticed that Pre-Pumps actually has used their Bloodlust on this boss, which is weird because, I mean, at least on live servers, most teams often save it for the last Ross, for Melandris, so we'll have to see how that works out for them. Talixay now at 35%, whilst Pure Luck is having some issues in the meantime, but Free Pumps trying to down Talixay and move on to the Guess Who game.
Moonwalking Druid, man, it's the new thing, I suppose. But anyway, as this boss is almost dead, almost done with, and just kiting back as much as they can. It's just a small semicircle you almost fit here as in a tyrannical setting. In Fortified, it's barely even that. It's on like 1, 2, 3 spawns of those imps, and then you're totally fine. But Free Pumps right now has free reign over this game.
I mean, they're pumping out the damage. Talixay now sub 10%. Last wave of imps that they're going to have to deal with here. As long as they keep those interrupts on the wither right now, they should be absolutely fine. Those imps barely, I mean, they just spawned and they're down to 20% health already. Talixay going down now. So now, coming up in this sequence here, of course, they don't have the advantage that we mentioned for the Demon Hunter, but the name of the game now is that there is a dinner guest, an uninvited dinner guest, if you will, that is actually an evil demon.
Ooh.
Hidden, hidden as a Nightborn. And the only way to discover who it is to collect clues from around the room. He will have 5 clues that will hint as to who the demon is. You'll have to find the right one. They will lead you to a very secluded and romantic balcony, after which they will try to devour your face. Once that happens, you will have access, and once you defeat them, rather, you will have access to the last boss.
Perish the thought, Sloot, that they get their hands on some of that forbidden souffle, and then they can only devour you instead of that souffle. You're not giving the demons that. But there you go. There's just talking to all these guys at the moment, and now they've marked who they think is the suspect.
And it seems that they are leading them to said balcony right now. Now, this mob, not too dangerous. Eventually, if you climb up the ladder of, ridiculousness in terms of high Mythic Plus percentage, there will be some abilities that will just straight up one-shot. But in a 22 environment, they should be able to just cleanly sit there and kind of face tank and DPS this mob as much as possible. Only a couple of notables to really look out for here. You want to make sure that you dispel or freedom the cripple that goes on the tank, as it will decrease your strength by 50%. They want to get every ounce of damage as they can out. And of course, the Shadow Bolt volley. But by the time it ramps up in any form of too much damage for the group, it'll be long dead.
Yeah, there's Carrion Swarm as well, but overall that's just going to be facing the tank and not really being too impactful on the rest of the group, so utterly fine there. And then once this is dead, you just want to start channeling one person picking up the keys to be able to go over to the door to trigger the lovely conversation.
Keys do often open doors, Claire.
That's correct.
We are on the correct path here. We do see the demon going down shortly here. Now, the last boss, I'm interested to see. I don't think they'll have too much struggle. We are on a 22, tyrannical nonetheless, but I don't think they'll have too much trouble with Melandris. But Melandris follows suit from Talixay in that there's kind of a ramping damage as the fight goes off. Now, it will cap off at, if I'm not mistaken, 6 images plus his own pulse.
Yeah.
But as long as you can deal with that capped out damage, and we're going to probably see a lot of offensive play at the start from the Holy Paladin, they should be completely fine and good to go.
Yeah, and you can bait certain abilities in certain spots to really kind of free up tons of room on this balcony. So maybe we'll see the Hunter repositioning those images, or at least forcing the positioning of those images as this fight goes on. As Elisanda is going to go up to a high tower and play with some time or something, I don't know.
We already met her once upon a time. Melandris here now. So there are 3 main abilities really to look out for. One is this kind of Blade Surge Charge, which will go on the furthest player away from the target, as you rightfully pointed out. The Hunter is the one to bait it out. And then we'll have to be... Ooh! Viviu getting a little too hasty there in the meantime, getting caught in that Piercing Gale that will not only shoot out in a complete line from the boss, but also from any images. So he gets caught in that, does quite a bit of damage. You have to watch out in the meantime for some of the storms and the Slicing Maelstrom. Now, the Slicing Maelstrom does AoE damage to everybody in the room, but will also do extra damage if you're too close to some of those images. As you can see, they're stacking them well there in the meantime. But the more images there are in the room, the more damage there's going to be on the group.
Perhaps a Windwalker Monk would be blown away in this kind of encounter, but there you go, one of them having fallen. But again, they have plenty of battle reses, so it wasn't like too big an issue for them as this continues on. Quite a lot of damage coming out, of course, with those slicing winds, but Serps is able to deal with that very, very well. And the continued baiting of this, as the Hunter is just walking around almost, and actually no, now is stacking them, so Avalanche is in a really good spot.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing really well to bait here. All of them perfectly stacked. It also makes that Piercing Gale really predictable. You know, because they always shoot a line in front and behind them. So as long as you know that they're pointing in the same direction, you can safely move to the side. Viviu, I'm sure at this point, has learned his lesson on which direction to move in. Melandris now getting back into position in the middle. And it seems like the Slicing Maelstrom damage is really not too much for them to deal with. I do like that they're also purposefully eating the tornadoes that spawn, because subs can actually use those to dispel the target and gain the Cephas proc, should he be wearing that legendary right now.
It's funny, when you play this, when you fight this on live, say for like the very first time or first couple of times, it looks like a very chaotic fight. But when you get to this kind of level of play, you can see how well they're able to control and manipulate so many factors in this fight to make it almost a non-issue, to the point where one death alone is surprising, never mind anything beyond that.
Yeah, no, they do very well here. I mean, it's just, the Paladin bubbling here, cleaning up the rest of the storms is just so well organized. And you're absolutely right. It's a fight that at first glance is just so chaotic.
Yeah.
I mean, the first time I was like, what's going on here?
What's all the wind? What's going on?
But it's once you really learn the mechanics and master them, this is the kind of the result you get. Landers now dropping to 9%. In just a moment, he'll be down, and Free Pumps should be able to take the series without too much hesitation. Subs does well, as we alluded to go offensive at the start, and as that ramping damage increases from the Slicing Maelstrom, go more defensive.
Yep, Free Pump's able to complete the reverse sweep there, convincing full screen, I think, after some issues on the other side of the bracket, but